you for watching Just Upright. I did an interview with Andrea. She's an awesome occupational therapist and she is also expert in Pilates. So we talk about the importance of core, not only to for posture but also for balance. So these are free resource for all therapists to use. Another tool that we can use in our toolbox for home exercise program that will benefit our patients. Strengthening up the core to improve posture, to improve balance, and decrease the fall risk of our patients. Watch
Glad to
this.
hear.
I know. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Just Upright. My name is Gina Lynn Ruder, and I have a very special guest, and she is a brave soul who answered for my call to collaborate with an occupational therapist about core, abdominal muscle, the trunk muscles. I personally think, as I was doing my book, uh, I put there one of the most neglected muscles for balance is the one of them are calves, the plantar flexors, calf muscles. And another thing that I think personally is one neglected muscle, and I'm guilty of this as a physical therapist, is the core muscle, and it's incredibly important for everyone to have a strong core muscle, specifically for older adults, and I would say for people with low back pain, so I would let her introduce herself. She is Andrea. She is an occupational therapist. And what state are you from, Andrea?
Hi, thank you, Jen. I'm practicing in Virginia.
All right. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi there. I'm Andrea Detar. I've been an OT for 23 years. I've been fortunate to practice in many states. I've moved quite a bit due to my husband's work, which has afforded me the opportunity to work in a lot of different practice settings, for which I'm grateful. But I've really spent the bulk of my career in home health.
Gotcha.
I was a Division I runner in college, so I have a strong running background, fitness and overall wellness background. Did some additional training in rehabilitative yoga and Pilates, and that's what really kind of lit my fire to incorporate more core stability work in my work with my patients.
Yeah, that's awesome because when I was thinking about this interview, I was thinking of an occupational therapist and a Pilates instructor. And, well, I got what I asked for. One person, can do it both. That is so awesome. So, so when I was teaching, I used to teach in the Philippines in review centers, and I was teaching anatomy and kinesiology part. And I always try to explain to my students, if this is your back and this is the core, we have what like the intrathoracic pressure inside. I always explain that if the core is strong, it's like supporting the back so that the back is not carrying all the weight.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, and I teach that a lot to my patients because so many people have low back pain, even if it's not the primary diagnosis that you're treating them for, they have that concurrently. And just talking a little bit about the difference between working those deep core muscles, the transverse abdominis, and those things that take the strain off of the low back, and how that's so different from their idea of what core training is, which is more some of those aesthetic gains
Right.
that people want to get by working the other layer of abdominal muscles, which really isn't where the magic is for the bulk of our patients.
Gotcha. And it's funny that you said that because I went back to school for my DPT, and were asked to read tons of research studies, and there are researches out there that's really targeting that multifidus, the deep layer of the back,
Yeah.
the transversus abdominis muscle, and they even use imaging studies to see the ultrasound, to see the changes in the diameter of those muscles during exercise. And, they're really focusing on those deep muscles in relation to improving the low back pain, which is very, very interesting because most people, they're thinking of core strengthening is what they see on TV,
Yes.
the crunches.
No sit-ups, no crunches. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's very, so for you, what if there are like simple exercises, like especially your home health, and these are the things that you really teach your patient in real life, situation at home. What are the exercises, simple exercises that an older adult or even middle-aged adult can do to strengthen up their core muscles?
Sure. And you let me know, Jen, what's the best format if I can try to demonstrate them with
Oh,
some video
well, by
assistance.
all
I could
means.
try that.
Yeah.
And you let me know if this isn't working. But I have found a couple of things that are somewhat easy to modify
Okay.
in a home environment. Let me see. You let me know.
Sure. You have a cameraman?
Are you able to see this here?
I can see your waist up.
Okay, maybe just a
Okay,
little bit.
there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things for patients who can stand, I would argue too that one of the most neglected muscles in the core is actually the glutes. And I think that people forget the posterior chain, that's also part of your core. Right. And a lot of times we think of glute training as just for aesthetics too. But so many of our patients, because they sit so much, they have completely deactivated their glutes. So what I will start with is with two hands on the surface, providing some level of support, is being able to kick that leg back and just stand on one leg, okay? You will find right away that patients who have weak glutes can't do this. They'll put their toe down. That's your first indication. If they can't kick their leg and keep it suspended behind them, the first thing I'm going to ask them to do is bend their knee instead. Because just like we learned back in kinesiology, when you shorten the lever arm,
yes,
you decrease the load. Okay, this also works better if the patient is tipped forward a little bit. Interestingly, most of our patients who are scared of falling compensate in that posture anyway, which of course we're trying to get them out of, but this is one exercise where you can use it to your advantage. Of having tip forward a little bit, kicking that leg straight back, bending the knee if needed. And then once they can hold this, because those core muscles are contracting isometrically just to hold this position, just doing nothing at all. But once they've mastered this, I'll challenge them to release the opposite arm. So this is a variation of like a warrior series you might see in yoga. And then we're just going for time, just for holding this. If they get to the point where they can master this and you want to upgrade that, then you try to get them to be able to do it with a straight leg and back, making it even more, you need more recruitment from the glutes. Okay, and of course, if they're able, depending on their diagnosis, we'll try to switch sides. Now, it's interesting, nobody is ever a matching set. So what they're able to do and what level you're able to do on one side is often totally different than switching it up. But I think those gradings make it easier to document as well. To say they could hold it for 10 seconds with a bent knee, and then they were able to hold it for 20 seconds with both a bent knee and an extended arm, and then going up to a straight leg. So that's sort of how I upgrade that one.
Gotcha.
I also love just doing a kind of a modified, what we call a tree pose in yoga. I don't know if you're able to see that I do have a walker here as well. So depending on your practice setting and what you have available, you can do this with a walker for support or a counter. But just cueing the patient to touch one heel to the opposite calf. Okay? And I don't know if you're able to see, but in a tree pose, we're actually in hip external rotation. A lot of patients have a tough time with that. This can be really revealing. And they're going to stay just like this. That's okay, but you do use the core, your abdominals, a little bit more in this position. And then again, we can play around with, can we let go with one hand, and for how long? And then for some more advanced patients, can we let go with both hands? Sometimes we never get there, but just being able to go for a longer period of time.
Gotcha.
And I have found even with the geriatric population, these folks like to have a little bit of fun. They like to have a little bit of a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So timing, I think, gives them something to work towards. I never like to discharge a patient to a home exercise program and just say, hey, keep doing this forever and ever every day of your life.
Right.
It's more fun to say to them, hey, when you get better at this, you could go to this level. Or instead of 10 seconds, go for 20 seconds. So those are two that I use quite a bit with my home health patients.
Gotcha. Okay. So just maybe wrap it up again, for everyone watching. If for example, you are like on the spot, okay, I am your patient, and then you're going to instruct me on what am I going to do first.
Okay, you'd like me to talk you through it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So assuming we can get a patient to standing, which that alone is going to require some glutes because we always want them to scoot forward in the chair first, and we can get them standing, we're going to first just have both hands. So I would document that bilateral upper extremity support, okay? Then I would cue them, bend your knee,
okay,
and see if you can't move that knee back behind you. Kick your leg out back behind you. Make sure you keep your toe off the ground. Keep it suspended. That part is key. And we're just gonna hold, okay? I'm sorry, I did forget about tipping forward. So the more they can be in this plane, the better. Closer to parallel to the floor or the counter, okay? And we're just gonna do a countdown and see how we can do. When they've gotten to the point where they can hold this for 10, 15 seconds, then we might add, release your opposite arm and just freeze like a statue. And then we're gonna see how long we can hold that. When they master that, then we're gonna say, hey, let's try that again. But this time, can you straighten your knee and still keep your toe off the ground, back behind you? If your leg is straight, can you also release your hand and freeze like a statue? And do a countdown. So for some of my patients who really get into this and have smartphones, I'll have them set up a little timer and a little alarm. They enjoy that, to be able to monitor if they're progressing their time.
Gotcha.
As for the modified tree pose, I would say, again, we're going to start with both hands for support, and I simply cue them to touch one heel to the opposite calf, and then if they need the cueing, to turn their knee out. And again, we're just freezing like a statue. Okay, can we release the opposite hand? All right, of course, always looking for compensatory tendencies when they're really trying to shift their weight. That's really key when they release that opposite hand. And then for a more advanced patient, can they release both?
Gotcha. That is awesome. I mean, that is, the best thing I've done with yoga and Pilates are from DVDs, So I had idea about some of the poses, and some of the principle of Pilates and yoga. So that is awesome for standing. What is your go-to when the patient is laying in bed? Because one of my go-to, and you mentioned that about the glutes, and I totally agree with that. That's why I love bridge exercise. Yeah. Bridges. I mean, I don't care if you are 100, 90, 80, as long as you can do it without contraindication, without increased pain or exacerbation of your condition. I always tell my patient, if you are leaning, hunching forward, the only way you can reverse that, one way you can reverse that is doing the bridge exercise. And
I completely agree. Bridges, if I could only have a handful of exercises, that would be on my list. I tend to not dig really deep into bridge modifications with my patients because that is one area that my physical therapists are really consistent with, always giving bridging in their home exercise program. So I try to just do things that will supplement that, so we're not stepping on each other's toes or duplicating services. Right. But if I catch a patient supine, and I try to take advantage of this, no matter which practice setting you're in, home health, nursing home, rehab, sometimes you just find a patient in bed and that wasn't your intent, but instead of being disappointed in that, you can take advantage of that plan B and work on some core strengthening instead. So again, I don't know how well you can see what I'm doing here, Jen. Let me know if you need me to move the camera. But if I'm in a supine position, trying just to work with the patient getting out of posterior pelvic tilt and pressing their low back into their bed. And you can test this by putting a towel or something back there, making sure you can't get that out. And having them just lift one knee with the knee in 90 degrees of flexion, up and down like this. You're using a tremendous amount of core just to do that, okay? A more advanced method would be kind of a chopping motion with the opposite hand. So you're getting some diagonals like this. Well, you can also do some obliques with a ball, some diagonal patterns, a cross body in a supine position. But I used to get discouraged when I found a patient in bed, but now I find that switch gears, use that as your opportunity to do some of those more supine core work.
Yes, yes.
And if some of my colleagues aren't familiar with Pilates, if you just look up what's called the 100 series in Pilates, it's some very short motions with the arms, and you can add in leg motions, things of this nature. There's lots of modifications that you can do for all ability levels.
Right.
And then adding in whether or not they can get their shoulder blades off of the bed, to add a little bit more core work.
Gotcha. Yeah, the 100 series, that's one of my favorite that I've been doing from the Pilates that I've learned.
Yes, it's easy to modify. There's lots of ways to modify that. So this being supine is not a bad thing. There's a lot of work that can be done there too.
Right, right. Okay. So is there any other thing that you want to, as an occupational therapist and, as being in Pilates instructor, you're knowledgeable about this. Is there any other, like, maybe a challenge for occupational therapists, occupational therapy assistant that you want to give, or advice that you want to give in relation to strengthening the core? Because here, I forgot to say, with the core and with the back strengthening, I actually advise and actually do this with my patient, is to retractors, to strengthen up. I don't know if you can see this picture, but like a TheraBand, and again, wrap around, and just because most of them are hunched. So the retractors are, very stretched, very weak. And I ask them, and I even do it manually. I hold the TheraBand in front of me, and they hold it, and they will pull it. And I'm doing it in standing. So I'm working on, dynamic standing balance at the same time, strengthening the retractors, because I think that is very important for them to strengthen up the upper trunk. So so those points that you have given about exercise and home, being practical at home in standing and in laying down are good. So any challenge message to occupational therapists who are at a loss on how to target the core?
I would just say, don't be afraid that you can't justify it, and don't be afraid about it being territorial with PT. It absolutely ties into functional activity. If your core muscles are really taxed, if you were to do a really hard core activity yourself and you were experiencing DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, lots of lactic acid, and you tried to vacuum carpet or broom sweep or transfer laundry from a washing machine to a dryer, where you are using all of this. So if you are seeing your patient struggling to do those things, and they're using terms like, I'm weak, I just need to sit, I'm too tired, maybe they aren't articulating it, but it's really because they don't have the core support to be doing those motions. So those exercises absolutely tie directly to those functional tasks. It's actually pretty easy to document.
Gotcha. So you're telling that what I'm hearing is that maybe some therapists, occupational therapists, are not doing it because of the problem with documentation.
I think that's part of it. I think the core has become this gray area, like you said, how we become divisive between PT and OT, and sometimes this gets left. And I love educating my patients on it too. they really grasp it when you explain it to them. And when you're doing these exercises to correlate it and say, hey, doesn't this motion kind of look like what you're doing when you're loading or unloading the dishwasher to do some cross body things? And they get it and they're appreciative.
Yeah, I think when also being in the home health, you know, if the therapist incorporated during therapy, they can appreciate it more.
Yes. And if you're in a clinic setting, one thing I like to explain is just imagine that your body is like a tree trunk. And if that tree trunk is a wet spaghetti noodle and has no control, you don't have any control on your limbs either. You got to be strong here. So even if they're talking about how they feel like their arms are shaky or their shoulders are shaky, is taking it back to, we've got to be strong here first.
Really appreciate the time.
It was nice to collaborate with you, Jen. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your insight about this, and hopefully we can do more in the future, you know, specifically.
It's helpful.
Yeah. All right. Well,
great. Thank you, Jen. You have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, and stay safe, Andrea. I appreciate it. Bye. Okay. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to hit the subscribe button below. It is for free for the latest video updates. Thank you for your support and stay blessed.